people who work in high-class restaurants and hotels, what is the most ridiculous, stereotypical rich person thing you've ever experienced someone has done? I've met 2 celebrities through my various work experiences. Tim Allen requested that we close the small bakery that I worked at for him while he is dining there. We did. He didn't leave a tip. Later in my career I met Mario Batali, famous Food Network chef, and he was the most normal person ever. He took a class with us, and then proceeded to pay for everyone else's class that was in his group and bought lunch for the staff as well. I guess both are stereotypical rich person things, for vastly different reasons. Capital I. I am disappointed in hearing this about Tim Allen. I operated a premium chain restaurant in Canada. One day this Indian gentleman started coming in, at first by himself. On the first day he spent $200 on wine and tipped $1,000. The next day he did the same again. When we saw him the third time I had servers fighting over him. Anyway, one evening he got drunk on wine and Brad the busboy made the mistake complimenting his watch. Mr. S. takes off his tag and gives it to Brad. The next morning Mr. S comes back to get his car and asks if Brad is there. I say yes and go get him. Brad knows what's up and is removing the watch as he walks over to Mr. S. Mr. S says, "Brad, I'm really sorry I got drunk last night and gave you my watch." Brad is chuckling as he is removing the watch and says it's no problem and he was just holding the watch until Mr. S returned. The next thing Mr. S said, "I could not believe. Brad, you don't understand. I'm sorry because it was very rude of me to give you a used gift." And at that moment Mr. S pulled out a box with a brand new tag viewer inside and handed it to Brad. I interviewed at a large hotel attached to a casino, and while I was being shown around the front desk, a woman walked up, said nothing, and got room keys after being greeted by the front desk agent. She immediately turned and walked away. Then the manager who was interviewing turned to me and said, "That's Mrs. Recladipants. You never ask her for her name, her ID, or God forbid a credit card. She stays here camped once or twice a week because her husband spends so much in the casino. If you upset her she will yell at you and then hand the person working next to you a $100 bill just to spite you." I ended up turning down a job there. Thankfully so, because apparently she wasn't the only guest of her type there. I wouldn't have taken the job, then teamed up with my co-workers to get money off of her, but upsetting her, then we'd split the money. My uncle works at a very upscale restaurant on a very well-to-do and desirable vacation island in the Atlantic Ocean. One of their regular customers is a billionaire oil guy. My uncle has told me he arrives on a yacht that tows a smaller yacht. The smaller yacht is still big enough to have a helicopter. He demands to have his dogs seated at the table and feeds them foie gras and expensive water. When he takes humans to eat, my uncle has never seen him with the same woman twice, and often it's a table of women. If he really liked the meal he will go through the restaurant and, in front of everyone, peel off crisp 100s from a giant roll of money in his pocket and tip every service person whether they helped or not. One time the owner got a call from health inspectors saying they received a complaint that dogs were seen eating in the restaurant. All the owner did was speak the billionaire's name and the health inspector said, "Oh okay, bye." Ah yes, I'm glad you've met my uncle. Lol jokes, but this guy seems like a real life Bruce Wayne. Don't work at any high class restaurants or hotels, but I currently live in an old yet nice and comfy apartment in Giza, around 20 minutes from the Pyramids complex. The landlady is a very nice old lady, probably in her 60s, and is filthy rich. Last year my car had to be repaired after a minor crash for more than a week, and when the landlady found out from the doorman, about my situation, she sent one of her English-speaking maids to give me car keys for a BMW 520i, Mercedes-Benz S600, and a brand new Land Cruiser. The madam insists you use her car until yours is repaired. I was shocked, of course, and asked her if she still could go around with her lending this much cars to me. "No worry, madam has 12 cars in Al Kahira." Okay, I guess. I ended up only using the Land Cruiser because it's the cheapest one, I think. Another story is when she knew I would graduate from college soon. She asked me to come visit her place. I did as she asked, and she just gave me a set of keys and some money. "Here, I have nice villa in Ansokna. Go visit it with friend and family. Food and drinks is on me. I have maids and cooks there. Car, you can use mine. The money is for fuel. Happy graduation. I told her that I just couldn't take it, but she just shooed me away and told me to return her keys only after I really visited the villa. Haven't gone to the place yet, but I will soon enough when I have time. Ridiculous. Yeah, but in a really good way. Sounds like she either doesn't have children or they're all grown up and she just wants to spoil someone your age. See if she'll adopt you. I worked for a resort in the Seychelles for 4 years. I have hundreds of stories which would fit this post, but one that stands out was a very wealthy Canadian family who stayed at one of the private residences for a couple of weeks. They brought their own staff including 2 personal chefs, but also asked for a hotel chef to assist their team with prep and local ingredient knowledge. A chef I was friendly with was selected to spend the 2 weeks with them. One day, another member of their staff came down to one of the restaurants and purchased 2 bottles of wine for 11,000 euros plus each. Now we had far more expensive bottles on the list, but this was still a notable sale, and later that night, I asked my mate what they had cooked to accompany the wine. Turns out they had poured both bottles into the pot while making a coq au vin. I physically recoiled away from my phone after reading that. I've got a pretty good one. I work at a luxury property in California, and we had a co-founder of a large payment processing company stay with us a while back. He only liked to sleep on his own bed, so when he woke up that morning, he paid a team to load his bed into a truck and have it delivered to our property. We then removed the bed in his luxury suite and set up his bed that his team had brought us. He only stayed with us one night and the process was done to send the bed back home the following day. It kind of blew my mind that he went through all that trouble, just so he could always sleep on his own bed. To each their own, I guess. Being rich sounds exhausting. Hiring people to do things and instructing them what to do all the time seems like a real hassle. There's a thing in Stockholm's rich kid district called Vaska. Basically, you order an expensive bottle of champagne, pay for it and watch how the waiter wastes all of it by pouring it down the drain. Some places let you do it yourself. Sadly, it's an established thing in these kinda circles. Like, it's on the menu cards and all that. Honestly, the dumbest way of flexing I've ever witnessed. Weird flex and not okay. I don't even work at that nice of a restaurant, but last month I got chewed out over the phone because some lady left her baby's actual silver spoon on the table, and we didn't know where it was, so obviously one of us had stolen it. Did you ask her to check her baby's mouth? I'm loosely acquainted with someone who is obscenely rich. He dated my best friend for a while back when we were in college. As you can imagine, he bought her fancy things all the time, took her on expensive family vacations with his folks. Ect. He was a stereotypical rich kid, but he was also kind and still very down to earth. They dated about a year, and in the spring we went spring breaking in his family's condo at a famous spring break beach location, and there was just me, my best friend, him and a couple of his friends. The group decided we wanted good old-fashioned Waffle House breakfast after a night of revelry. After eating, I noticed he was lingering behind the group. He'd said he had to take a leak, but he stopped back by the table on his way out to the car. Curious, I ran back to the restrooms just so I could pass by the table to see what he'd done. He left the waitress a small pile of Benjamins as a tip. Had to be $400 or $500. I couldn't quite tell because they were folded and rumpled from being in his wallet. My mouth fell open when I saw it and I forgot I was even heading to the restroom. I looked out by the car and he was watching me through the glass windows, held up his finger to his lips mouthing SHHHH, and beckoned me back out to the car. I didn't tell, but my eyes were glued to the table as we pulled away in his car. The waitress collapsed into the seat of the table when she saw it. Pretty sure she was crying. Letting that guy get away was the dumbest thing my best friend ever did in her life. You should have scooped him up. Ordering $150 caviar to go for their cat. I am a cocktail server at the huge pool of a 4-star hotel. A woman said in a monotone voice and without any eye contact, "I lost my sunscreen. Find it." Just hand her a tub of Crisco, and when she gets pee just say you didn't specify. I worked at a nice restaurant in downtown Portland, and one day a lady called to make a dinner reservation for a large group. But first she starts asking all these questions about security. We had none. And how I thought the staff and patrons would handle the celebrity dining there. Is there enough space to be private? They like to be private. Would it be okay if they brought their own security to stop people from taking pictures and such etc. But of course, she couldn't name names. I rolled my eyes, told her whatever they need to do, and booked the date and time. Yes, I was super curious who it would be, and stayed past my shift to see who walked through the doors when the big night came. The group arrived, and it was no one. Not one of us who worked there recognized a single member of their party. They sure acted like they were someone, but all we saw was a loud group of douchey looking 20-somethings. They actually did bring a bodyguard who stood in the corner with sunglasses on the whole time. The only attention they got from other diners was the occasional side eye because they were being such rude and obnoxious buttholes. Shock of shocks, they treated our staff horribly, and tipped even worse. We'll never know who that person thought they were. This happened about 9 years ago, so a little before the YouTuber invasion I think, but maybe not. Just some punks who thought they were someone. We did try to add 18% but the party threw a massive fit about that. Complained about the service, which I'm sure was fine. It was a well-known place, and refused to pay it, so the manager took it off so as not to create a bigger scene. Left the server in tears. I think everyone just wanted to get them out by that point. Back when I did waitering, there was a woman and her friends at one of my tables. The woman asked for a can of Coca-Cola, just so we're clear. When I brought their drinks and gave the woman her Coke, she looked at me and, in that typical rich bee voice, said, "Excuse me, honey, I asked for Fanta, not Coke." So I apologized, wrote it onto my notepad, and went back to get her a can of Fanta. Brought it to her, and again, she turned to me and said I didn't ask for Fanta, I asked for cream soda. By this time, I was getting a bit annoyed, but went back and got her a cream soda anyway. And surely, when I returned to her table, she did the same thing again. I asked for Sprite. Should I call the manager? So, for the last time, I smiled and I went back to the kitchen and packed one can of each. Coke, cream soda, Fanta, Sprite, Pepsi and Sparberry soda, into a small plastic box and took it all to her and said, "Here you go, miss, take your pick." She looked offended and almost made the scene. She started lecturing me about how I'm incapable of getting the simplest order right and that she wants to talk to the restaurant's manager. I told her that I can call him, and that I'll show him all the soda types I wrote on my notepad that she asked for, and we can get his opinion on the matter. She turned and took her dang Sprite out of the plastic box and said just leave it. Her friends were silent throughout the whole ordeal and none of them gave me any issues further on. I didn't receive a tip, as expected, but I shrugged it off. Most customers were decent. Had a business dude rent one of our apartments for 3 weeks at this fancy hotel I worked at. Second day, we get a maintenance call. He wants us to remove to the TV, not replace it, just remove it entirely. As housekeeper I head up with maintenance to clean up any mess from the move and got to see it all. The guest is removing our TV, because he's gone and bought his own, bigger, flasher, brand new. There was also a brand new, I cleaned up the packaging, PS4 he was hooking up to his new TV. We had no idea if this was against policy so we left it. Guy's paying for the room. He's not broken anything. I jaff. At the end of his stay, he leaves it all behind. Maintenance dude took the TV. Easier to smuggle out the service entrance for him. I took the PS4 and sold it for more traveling funds. Thanks, ridiculously rich business dude. You paid for 2 weeks of traveling. Cause there's some serious butt going on about how it's totes impossible to travel for 2 weeks on the price of a PS4. 1. Chill out. I did it. It really happened. I had a great time. I got $240 for the PS4 plus controller plus baggie of weed I'd found in a separate hotel room. Had drug dealing to grand larceny guys. We racking 'em up. I lived in a Toyota Corolla, ate instant noodles made on my little gas stove and traveled from Abel Tasman Nation Park around to a Perera Basin. Lot of beaches, lot of hiking, lot of chill days with a book and view. It's totally doable when you're scruffy crap who doesn't care about showering daily or eating regularly. I had an absolute ball, and I thank rich PS4 dude for that. I am in no way intending to misinform wannabe travelers. My advice if you're road tripping, make a budget, be sensible, then double the amount of money you think you'll need, and go with that. You won't need it, but you'll be prepared in case of an emergency or some super cool crap you see off the beaten track you just gotta do. I play poker for a living and every now and then some rich guy will sit down and start going all in every hand for $300, $500 without looking at his cards. One day I was in a game where a guy was betting $1,000, $3,000 without looking at his cards. It was insane to me, but for him I guess it wasn't that much money. I played in a friendly hold'em tournament where it got pretty late and one dude started doing that to just get the game over with. He doubled his chip stack within 5 hands. He won another 8 hands in a row after that. I've never caught cards the way he did that night. Worked at a grocery store in uppity Gold Coast, Chicago when I was a teen. We sold soup for lunch, and when bagging them, we put it in a paper bag followed by plastic bag to make sure it's secure. Lady buys a soup. I proceed to bag the soup and she says no, I'll just put it in my bag. I say, are you sure? Mind you, she has a Louis Vuitton bag that looks brand spanking new. 15 minutes later she comes in raging that she has minestrone all over her Louis Vuitton and demands to speak to a manager. SMH. Not a restaurant hotel worker. However, we were living in the Bahamas for a few months, and to occupy her time my mother volunteered at the school. This got the attention of a rich person. She invited us to Windermere Island. This is the kind of gated area where royalty have estates and you do not get to visit. The experience was surreal. We realized we weren't invited to chat. We were summoned to listen and entertain this bored housewife of a Texas oil tycoon. She had no interest in us, just talking about how she thought these kids should be helped. She never came to the school. We spent a couple hours there as this lady rambled on with the most twisted thought process. Not crazy, just twisted by circumstance, like a bird in a gilded cage. Then we were dismissed. This is by far the weirdest one yet. Worked at a private villa in Bali. One guest stood out. She only drinks and bathes in Evian. So one day I spent almost an hour filling a large tub from tons of Evian bottles. The same young woman complained that the path from her villa gate to her room wasn't well lit. She wore sunglasses at night. So on Amazon, a 12 case of Evian is a refreshing $249.71. I'm 3 years into sous chef at a private resort in upstate New York. Most of our guests are returning from generations before them. Wealthy, very wealthy. We get some congressmen, actors getting away from the daily crap, but mostly families that are crazy rich and 4 generations deep into annual visits. Insane the amount of requests. But one that stands out is a what in the fuck, 60-something-year-old woman crying as loud as she can because we didn't have the cookies she wanted. Guys, you would have thought she was just told someone died. Made a huge scene in the dining room. Her husband has the backbone of a jellyfish and just sat there trying to console her. It's okay honey, I'll get you cookies. Don't cry. The owner went out and bought store-bought cookies because we do not have time for that crap. We did not tell her they were store-bought. She was happy by the end of the night. Yay. Fast forward to dinner the next night. Same crap. Where's my cookies? We gave her the same store-bought cookies. Same package. These aren't the same. The baker used too much butter this time. Next night. Oh, these are much better. B, it's the same package. She comes every year. We all know ahead what week the cookie lady is going to be staying us, so we can get her crappy grocery store cookies. A young man I'll call business douche tried to send back 2 bottles of Penfolds Grange, not because of the taste, but because he was trying to impress older potential clients with his stunning wine knowledge. Yeah, right. The potential clients were so grossed out by the display that they paid for the meal and insisted on paying for both bottles and drinking them. Business douche tried to reach for a bottle to pour himself a glass, and the client told him that since it wasn't up to his standards he couldn't possibly let him have any. Effective business shaming 101. It was like watching Jack Donaghy at work. As a valet, probably tossing us the keys to the car, expecting us to know who they were. It was quite the experience to try to write a ticket out for them. They took offense to it. I used to work in a luxury hotel. A colleague of mine got a call from an in-house guest asking for a car to take him somewhere. Naturally, He offered him what options we had, and the guest got annoyed and closed the line. A few minutes later, the guest came down to the front desk and asked for my colleague. He then proceeded to show him a cardboard bag literally overflowing with cash, and started saying, "You dare ask me which car just because of different prices? Can't you see how much money I have? Why do I care? Just get me a freaking car ready. People." My apologies. Get him an Uber Prius. Worked in a fancy smancy lobster pound restaurant on the waterway, had a lot of outdoor seating. These very wealthy people come to eat and demand a table outside for dinner. Now it's just before sundown in the middle of summer in Maine and we're on the water, so mosquitoes are definitely not scarce. These people sit down, order a $200 bottle of wine, a massive lobster each and some appetizers. They seem to enjoy the meal up until the sun sets and the bugs come out. These people were not happy and complaining about it and the crappy restaurant not paying for mosquito spraying. The waitress gets a couple candles to light and asks if they need anything else, and those mother suckers asked her to stand next to them with a flisswitter. She laughed thinking they were joking, and the man said, "Whatever happened to good service nowadays?" They also left 0 tip on a $350 bill. There was this classic trick I used to do when seating people. If, based on the logistics, I needed someone to sit at a table I knew was the least desirable one close to the toilet, entrance etc., I would always make it look like it's reserved for VIP clients or in case the boss decides to come in to eat. Pretentious rich people want the opportunity to be seated somewhere special so badly that they never ask questions and go for it right away. It made my job a billion times easier back then. This isn't as much a specific instance, but something that happens all the time with entitled or rich people. I work at a very expensive hotel in Hawaii and people will just come up to the desk and yell words at you, like no hello or please, just our ATM. It's like they aren't even thinking of us as people. That used to happen to me when I worked at Whole Foods. I got watermelon and hemp. No, these people were not English language learners. They were just buttholes. I worked at a restaurant in the lobby of a rather nice hotel. There was a rich dude that basically lived there. He would eat in our restaurant every night. Our chef had to handpick his steaks from a local butcher. The steaks were freaking massive. It was always specially prepared just for him. Every freaking time this fuckstin would take 2 or 3 bites and complain to everyone in earshot that his steak was terrible. Every freaking time. This dude was odd. He would only drink our cheap wine that we served by the glass. However, he would request that you open a fresh bottle just for him. He couldn't possibly drink a glass of wine out of a bottle that was first opened for someone else. Even if I just opened the wine and poured a glass to the person next to him, that bottle was considered tainted to him. If you are that freaking picky, just buy your own dang bottle of wine. Victor, frick you. Oh, and one last thing. He parked in the handicapped spot out front, even though he is not handicapped. But because he spent so much dang money at the hotel, the managers refused to make him move his car or have it towed. And he knew that. Entitled pose. I'm none of the above, but a soldier. We held an annual ball at a local marina hotel restaurant bar and had it reserved for the evening. Barkeep host grabs our commander a few hours into the event and says there's a guy, he's a daily regular for the past 15 years, wants to grab his usual nightcap. Do you mind? The commander agrees and the gentleman comes in, sits at his spot, and proceeds to enjoy the show while occasionally covering costs for those of us grabbing drinks, in exchange for a little small talk about what we do. After about 3 hours, he grabs his coat and heads out. He then returns about an hour later, and proceeds to shut down the joint with us, still covering drinks here and there. The next day when I came in as part of the cleanup crew, grabbing drunkenly abandoned uniform or materials, the host gave me the breakdown after I asked how long their charges normally take to process, as I hadn't seen my bar tab hit my account yet. Turns out the regular owned a chunk of the marina, and covered a combined $12,000 bar tab as thanks to the servicemen and women. I had a tab of over $450 waiting on my card, completely covered that night. It was glorious. I hope somewhere up there in the North Country this old rich dude is still getting his daily nightcap and making people's lives. He was engaging to talk to, pleasurable company, and didn't leave things hanging when one was ready to move on. If I run into him again, I'll tell him the tab he covered was almost $4 upvote to the karma I received off this story. Whoa, that's impressively generous. My former boss, insanely wealthy, used to stay in presidential suites and would have any and all red removed. He was a high roller at several casinos and they made special chips just for him as a substitute to red chips. He hated the color red because when you're losing money, you're in the red. Your former boss was a crip. I work at a Marriott, one that is more expensive than your typical hotel but by no means a place that millionaires or celebrities would come to, especially because of our suburban location. However, that doesn't mean I don't often get people who think that because they are paying $150 a night on a Marriott hotel room, honestly not that much but it feels a lot to them, that they can be just as rude and entitled as the other comments on our thread. My favorite little story is the guy who was shooting hoops at our sports court too early in the morning, and when I asked him to stop he just looked at me and threw the ball as far as he could into the parking lot, saying I'm paying too much to be treated this way. I'm talking to your manager. Ordering the most expensive wine in the house, pouring 2 glasses, taking a sip, and sending it back knowing full well they're paying for it. To those folks I say thank you. Nothing makes employees happier than free, expensive booze. They made me take their waters back, dump out the glass, put ice in the glass, add water, dump out the water but keep the ice, then fill the glass up with water again. I just went to the kitchen and walked out with the same glasses. During our honeymoon, my husband and I came back to our very nice hotel from a day full of hiking looking like homeless people. We were waiting for the elevator with another couple who were both giving us the side eye. Once on the elevator, the couple pressed the bottom for the top floor which was the same as ours. After about 30 seconds of silence and side eyes, the woman turns to me and says you need to press the button for your floor in a condescending tone. I told her our floor was already selected and she had the audacity to say you have a suite on the top floor. First and foremost, throw a 6-year-old's birthday party at a tapas restaurant called Wine Company. Try to feed them tartar. Scoff when your child asks for balloons or french fries. Try to feed them jalapeno creme brulee for dessert. Try to quiz them on picking out scents in wine. Sigh when they don't care. Keep ordering more wine when they fall asleep on the booth. Complain to in-laws about how exhausting motherhood is. Have to Uber home with a 6-year-old. Everyone else. Order a walnut salad and then yell at your server for it having walnuts, because you're allergic. Yell at server because the top of the creme brulee is burnt. Inquire about the immigration status of the chef. Tip your server $40 immediately after telling her she doesn't look too bright. Tell her she'll get over it. Shove your server when he comes to warn you that your reservation on the table is officially past the previously agreed upon time. Scream that he isn't allowed to touch you back when he tries to disconnect your arm from his collar. The top of my creme brulee and the chef are too brown. Send them both back. Not working there but saw someone claiming he can fire the waitress cause he has the power. Flew a classical piano player to perform at their 2-year-old's birthday party. Long time lurker here. Worked abroad at a high-end beach club in Greece where all our clients had to speak English as all the staff were Brits. Now this place is fairly top end. Tabs at the end are often £20,000 after a week kind of place. I worked all over but mostly in the restaurant and we had some great ones. Asked to turn down the volume of the insects in our outdoor restaurant. Had a competition with his mate to see if he could get the biggest bar bill of the week. Bought a bottle of rosé costing £60 plus just to have a glass. Their villa was 5-10-min walk from the club so paid extra for a private driver for the week. Paid for in-villa host for 3 meals a day for 2 weeks. Just for when they wanted to eat in. My friend was the host and she made 5 meals in total. All I can think of at the minute was a brilliant place to work though. And all in all the guests and staff were brilliant to work for with. Going back this summer. Asked to turn down the volume of the insects in our outdoor restaurant. I worked at a freaking Holiday Inn and I got that request. Don't come to the Midwest in the summer if you want to avoid cicada noise. Nothing will stop it butthole. I worked at a luxury vacation rental property in a small, affluent mountain town. You can probably narrow it down to a couple places already. Being a vacation rental meant we provided hotel-like services to guests on behalf of the owners. These were full ownership condos, not timeshare. One person owned it, in some cases owned several, with an average value of about $2 million for a 1-bedroom unit. I only say this to beat down stereotypes and make a point. Wait for it, though, there's a story coming, as most of our owners were actually relatively down to earth and kind people who made their money through a lot of hard work. I got to know some of them. Yes, a few were heiresses, but many more were self-made business people or executives in major corporations. I worked in the film industry previously, and one of the same rules apply there. The shittiest people are the ones who have ego issues, the ones who want to be hot crap, but no they aren't, but are rubbing elbows with those who are truly successful. On to the story. There was a tradition at our property that we put out warm cookies near the time the lifts close. We only made a certain number each day. Those that waited around or made it a point to get them always got one, and often we'd make another batch if enough demand was there, though some days we'd just give them away to neighboring businesses' staff because so many would be left. You never really knew, but did your best. Well, one day a lady and her daughter come looking for the cookies an hour after they were put out. They had been gone about 50 minutes now. She asked about the cookies, and I explained those are put out at a certain time, and was literally opening my mouth to offer to make one specially for her daughter. But before I could exhale a word, she launched into a tirade. So my daughter doesn't get one? Are you for real? You're a joke. You're worthless. Your job is worthless. And you shouldn't be working here. You are a freaking piece of crap. All this in front of her young daughter, no less. In spite of this, I smiled and offered to make one for her daughter, as I had originally intended to offer. She repeated how worthless I was and how I should never bother showing up to work again, and stormed off. I didn't say a word to her the rest of her stay. There is something about food that just enrages people. Anyone who's worked in the restaurant business knows this. Not a high-class restaurant or hotel, just a nice little shop selling fresh house-made pasta and sauces to take home and boil heat up yourself. We got the stereotypical rich people due to the location smack in the middle of Marin County, CA. This was in the late 80s and food trends were plentiful and rapidly evolving. Many people were very interested in being on the cutting edge of the latest trend, be it the latest hot restaurant or that month's fabulous must-have menu item. Not that they were actually into food, but just to be in the know and brag about how you simply must try the most fabulous tiramisu at latest hot restaurant. We actual restaurant folk would stoically refrain from rolling our eyes in their presence and carry on. So at the pasta shop one evening, a typical Marin matron arrived in her jeweled slippers, clattery jewelry and a cloud of perfume. She pushed past the other patrons in front of her and said she needed some squid ink pasta. I'm sorry, I replied. We don't actually make a squid ink pasta, but you may be able to find it at fancy grocery store in the same plaza. They carry several very good imported items. She gaped at me and started moaning no way no oh. Of course now everyone in the place was staring at her. She then told me that she had to have squid ink pasta because she had her gourmet friends coming for dinner and they had to have squid ink pasta. I apologized again, explaining that we didn't make squid ink pasta and again suggested the fancy grocery store, only to be cut off by her loud wailing no number again. I just stood and watched along with everyone else in the place as she paced up and down before the display case, clutching her head and repeating squid ink pasta, gourmet friends, squid ink pasta, gourmet friends over and over at the top of her lungs, as if this incantation would magically call forth a hidden cache of squid ink pasta. Needless to say, we could not provide said squid ink pasta, so I don't know what she served to her gourmet friends that fateful evening. The whole thing was just so bizarre and over the top. Anytime we encountered some delusional, entitled weirdo, we'd mutter squid ink pasta and cackle to each other. Positive stereotyping coming. I worked at a nice steakhouse in Houston. Once a year one of the biggest telenovela stars from Mexico would come into town to shop at the Galleria, and she always ate at our restaurant. After dinner, she would walk through the kitchen spending about a half hour laughing, taking pictures, and talking with the kitchen staff. In Houston about 90% of them are Hispanic. She was very aware of her status, very well dressed, and very kind to the hardest working and worst paid staff at that restaurant. Maybe doesn't fit here, IDK, but it was cool to see year after year. So, not a restaurant or a hotel, but a travel agent. Client is a dong. Client can't drive and crashes car. Client walks out of police station after filling out all paperwork following the crash and decides to commandeer the first helicopter he sees to get him where he wants to go. Because rich people logic. Footnote: there was a pilot to go with the helicopter. To eliminate any confusion on that count, client definitely would not be able to manage a helicopter on his own. Heck, he couldn't even manage his own travel plans. So I've played at a lot of these venues with rich clientele, but the one that takes the cake is the rich cockwaffle that comes and demands we play insert pop song on the number 10 billboard because his little princess likes it. Now while we have taken requests before, what's difficult here is that my fellow colleagues and I, professional string musicians, are getting paid by the venue to play classical music that we have pre-agreed on and prepared. My colleagues and I do not know the melody nor harmony nor even the bloody key of generic pop song number 7. Not even that, but we are not getting paid by you or your little princess, so we aren't gonna play it. Not that this makes us exactly loved by some of the venue's patrons. Strange thing happened to me the other day. I was in a supermarket, Tesco in the UK, grabbing some food to cook for the next day with a friend. I had left my wallet at home on purpose to avoid trying to eat unhealthy outside of my house. I'm in the queue, raw chicken in my hand, and I notice I've fricked up. I've left my wallet at home. Luckily my friend was with me in the queue, and before I can say anything else he says, "Don't worry, I got you." Some random suave looking dude in front of us, in his 40s or 50s, turns to us and says, "No guys, don't worry, I got you." We think he's joking, so proceed to laugh and continue talking amongst ourselves. The suave dude instructed an assistant to grab him 2 packets of cigarettes and scan our stuff too. At the self-checkout, we were confused at this point. He was being serious about buying our stuff. We wholeheartedly tried to reject his offer. In the end he kept insisting, so we allowed him to pay for both of our shops. Whilst the assistant scanned our food, we entertained small talk with him. He didn't seem to care much about our questions. He didn't tell us where he was from when I asked, but asked us a ton of questions and joked around. He then proceeds to pay for the total shop, approximately £30. He puts in a £50 note, and of the £20 change returned to him, he gives £5 to the assistant and tells us to keep the change, probably feeling bad because we're poor students. The strange thing about that encounter that has stayed with me is, he probably will have no recollection of what happened in a couple of months. It'll be something he's completely forgotten about. He genuinely did it out of the good in his heart. There was nothing to gain for him, but the memory stays with me, and although he's most likely forgotten, it's something I'll never forget. Oh man, this 4-top came into the restaurant I worked at, no, one in the state, consistently, spent a ton of money, tipped 50% on the bill, and then the guy who signed the check proceeded to leave a $300 Cartier pen in the book. I ran out to the valet stand to return it and he laughed and said keep it. I was also given a bag of about $500 and just flown in Bolivian Sea. Purest I'd ever do as part of a tip after I cut up straws for a table to snort with. They were doing blow right in front of the entrance to the service station, where all the staff and most of the guests could see them. Last favorite was a time when a 4-top ordered a last course sushi restaurant of $400 in Live Uni. Urchin ate one piece of each, and then said they were full and left the rest. One of the few times I've seen waitstaff unapologetically smash on someone's leftovers. I worked in a hotel in Edinburgh and we had Snoop Dogg come to stay. He prepaid the smoking fine, which came as no surprise. After he left, the room service team found a large amount of weed and hundreds of pounds worth of food and drink which hadn't been touched. Safe to say we had a wee party after our shift. He also only wears a pair of socks once, so there were plenty of those lying around too. Another time someone did a crap in the corridor. This happens fairly regularly as some guests feel that because they are paying £300 plus a night they get to do whatever they like. This is more in the vein of a rich douchebag stereotype, but my dad used to work as a valet for lorries in downtown Chicago. Some pretty well-known football player came in about 15 minutes before closing with a group of friends. He made them reopen the kitchen so they could all have steaks. Then they stayed for almost 2 hours after close, being really loud and obnoxious and rude to most of the staff. He also tipped everyone horribly, especially considering everyone had to stay later because of him. In contrast to this guy, there was another NFL player that came in that was not as famous. He was extremely kind to everyone and tipped amazingly. He didn't drive there, so there was no car for my dad to get, but he asked my dad if he could hail him a cab, and when he did, he gave him $100 just for that. You have been visited by the IT lizard. Upvote or experience bad internet for a month. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.